Happy mandolin can only mean one thing. It's time for the Radio Vet with Dr. Kelly, our resident radio veterinarian.
Hello.
I don't know if you had to do any postgraduate work to become a radio veterinarian, but
no, well, none that I'm aware of that I should have done. Anyways,
we have an unlicensed radio veterinarian. Anyways, so all right. So your topic today is very topical.
Yes,
and
very timely.
Going on in a place that's usually very tropical.
Yes. So right now there are unusually cold temperatures in Florida, and there are warnings about iguanas falling out of trees.
I saw some pictures.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad, actually.
They don't look very good.
They look a little brown. So
they don't look very good. And, people are basically being told, to leave them alone. They may still be alive.
Right.
In a day or two when it warms up again, they may reanimate.
Yeah. It's a miracle.
Yeah.
We'll name them all Lazarus.
However, they are an invasive species in Florida. They don't belong there.
Oh, that's an interesting hot take.
Yes.
Okay.
You can also harvest and sell iguana meat.
Oh.
Yeah.
Gamey.
I think it's, just like everything else. I think it's a lot like chicken.
My father-in-law from Mexico, born and raised in Oaxaca, was a regular diner on.
Now they
Iguana.
belong there,
right?
Yeah, as they belong in Central America and all the way into the tropical portions of South America.
Sure.
But they do not belong in Florida.
But they all have condos in Florida, unfortunately.
Yeah, and they survive well in Florida, unfortunately.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, they are an invasive species there.
And they can be an invasive species in your home, apparently, if the price is right.
Yeah, they are difficult. I think they are difficult pets. In general, my personal opinion is it's hard to keep reptiles healthy as pets because they need extremely specific environmental requirements and diet requirements, and most people just can't do it.
It's a chore. My wife, when we weren't even married yet, and she said, she somehow thought an iguana would be a good idea. Mm. Well, this thing hated my guts from the get-go. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, I didn't.
They're not domesticated.
No.
At all.
They really don't seem to,
If you get one that's very young, it's somewhat tameable. There are other reptiles that are more tameable.
Sure. Gecko, maybe?
And especially the bearded dragon.
Yeah. We did that for a while, and he was happy. He was actually, I liked him a lot better. The iguana was just really upset to be living with us.
And they get very large. When you see them in the pet store and they're tiny,
cute.
They're adorable. Yeah. They're adorable. But when they're full grown, if you include their tail
to nose,
male and female, it can get up to 5 feet.
Good Lord.
And you need a huge space.
Yes, you do.
If you can't keep an adult iguana, don't get any iguana.
Solid advice here on the Radio Vet. So I guess this begs the next question. Have you seen some in your travels? Have you? I mean, as a patient,
in travels, yes, I saw them in Puerto Rico.
Well, there's certainly that. I mean, but you weren't caring. You weren't hired to carry to help with them with their needs.
I haven't seen any in years, honestly.
Okay.
The practice I'm currently at, we really don't see reptiles.
Not an option for the Mequon office.
Yeah, really not.
So if I call you today and say, my iguana has a hairball.
If someone called and said, my, let's say, python has scale mites, sure, I can take care of that.
Really?
Yes.
That's pretty exotic.
But if, you have an iguana or another reptile that just isn't doing right, and they're going to need some probably really specific going over how the temperature gradient and the humidity and the diet. We're gonna send them somewhere else where they see a lot more reptiles.
The iguana doctor.
Yeah, exactly.
Somewhere in Milwaukee, I'm sure. So our story, which is not a happy one, we had this iguana. Occasionally he would get out as he was growing. My wife would be at work. I would be tasked with getting him back into the cage. Catching a loose iguana, those babies are fast. I mean,
they can be very fast.
And then they're like Indiana Jones. They have their own built-in whip.
Yes.
The tails are lethal. I mean,
the tail
holy
and
cow.
the claws are what you have to worry about. You
Oh,
don't
yeah.
have you don't have to worry about teeth.
Not really
You don't have
biters.
to worry about the
No.
face, the mouth. You have to worry about the claws and the tail.
Oh, the tail is they just they'll leave a mark.
A full-size, large male green iguana tail can break human bones.
Bones.
Yes.
No one told me that. I thought you were going to say skin. No, we'll take it a
for
step
sure.
further. We'll take it a step further. We'll actually
for
lop off
sure.
a limb.
I don't think it's very common at all. But I think it's
my
far
God.
more common to be cut by the tail.
Which I was.
Yes.
Because he still wasn't full grown yet.
Yeah.
He kept turning brown while he was out there because he was cold. So I think so it's just like everything about it. And eventually he turned on my wife because he liked my wife.
Okay.
And it was funny. My wife could actually talk him down because this guy was actually like just. Oh, it had like anger management issues, and so we named him Lees.
What?
Lees, actually short for lizard.
Okay.
So it's just a lame name. Yeah, everything about the whole thing was
Not
lame.
Liz.
No, not Liz because he was a guy. So we called him Lees.
I'd be
As
mad
the male
too.
gender of the version of Liz, I guess. So, yeah, right. So she actually could say when he was going to lunge at her, she'd say, "Liz," and he actually
He would stand
stop.
down.
He would actually, it was the funniest thing. I could not. I could say that a million times. He'd still, stick his tail on me.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
but then interestingly enough, when she was pregnant with our first child,
Yes.
he didn't respond to her anymore. He was really angry.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's a pheromone type of thing or something.
Probably something
Oh,
that,
isn't that lovely?
probably
So-
something like that.
So we rehomed him to somebody in Hartford, Wisconsin, who
Okay.
already had like 16 of them.
Okay.
So 17 was no big deal.
Right. What's
and they
the difference?
Yeah, they all hung out in his living room. We kept him in.
Yeah.
They would dangle off of like gigantic chunks of driftwood hanging on his wall. And I'm
Okay.
like, oh, you're gonna be really happy here.
Yeah. So
it's
interestingly,
horrible.
for an adult, a full-grown iguana, one that is approaching or close to 5 feet when you include the tail, you need an enclosure that's 12 by 6 by 6 feet.
Jeez.
And
that's your whole living room, folks.
They need a basking
Yep.
area,
Yep, hot
so
rock.
they need
Yeah.
heat. Actually, no, hot rocks are dangerous.
Boy,
you
the people
need-
at the pet store knew nothing about
No,
it.
that's sadly common. Hot rocks are
Fools.
dangerous. One of the most common injuries, probably the most common injury,
Overbaked.
in pet iguanas is burned skin from hot rocks or heating pads because they'll lay on them. It feels good to them. They have no idea that they are burning their own skin.
Burning their biscuits.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not good. So
Funny.
ideally, their heat source should come from above.
Above, right.
And that
is expensive.
partially is because they have a special scale behind their eyes, which senses light, UV
Yes.
light. It's their pineal organ, and that it's important. So the hot spot in the cage should be 120 degrees.
Oh my gosh.
And they should have a gradient all the way down to around 80, so they can move from hot to cool to hot to cool.
Here in Wisconsin, that's really hard to just maintain.
Yeah, you're going to expend some energy.
Oh
yeah.
my goodness.
And they need UVA and UVB
Right.
exposure.
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
Ugh.
10 to 12 hours a day.
Oh my gosh. And yeah, that was the thing. That was part of our bedtime ritual. Just like brush your teeth, make sure the kitchen lights off, make sure you switch the iguana lights
Yep.
to UV. I was
Yeah.
just like, oh, what a bummer.
Yeah,
Oh my
they are
gosh.
hard. I think they are hard to keep healthy. Now, if you bring one home and they're real healthy at the pet store, is it going to, get unhealthy right away if you don't have ideal conditions? No, it could take months to years for the damage you're doing to show up.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That must happen a lot because, I mean,
Yes.
people are just, that's not.
They don't. They have good intentions, but not always all the information.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're here for. Thank you for tuning in, everybody.
Yeah.
You informed pet owners.
So they are vegetarians
True.
technically. However, they will scavenge. When they're wild in Florida,
Sure.
they've been seen eating dead things,
Lovely.
and they will occasionally eat insects by accident, especially a kind of tree snail that lives in Florida.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they'll also snack on some important plants, which are the sole food source for endangered butterflies.
Oh, lovely.
Which is why one of the
Yeah.
reasons they're a problem as an invasive species.
Yeah, absolutely. We used to feed our guy. He liked collard greens.
Yes.
That was the thing. Yeah, so we did that. That was great.
Dandelion greens, all
yeah.
kinds of dark leafy greens, vegetables. And once a week, they should have fruit.
Yeah.
And once a week, they should have a calcium
Yep.
supplement.
Yep.
Oh,
They
yeah.
had that powder we used to sprinkle on the leaves and everything.
Yes,
That
and
was all
so
lovely.
besides the hot rock injuries.
When we remembered.
Yeah, besides the hot rock injuries, probably their most common medical issue is metabolic bone disease.
Because of the lack of
calcium, or lack of absorption, or honestly lack of proper UV exposure and vitamin D production.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Maybe part of that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then sometimes, when they were first kind of popularized as pets, people were told to feed them cat food.
What?
Because it bulked them up. They thought it was probably a good sign, these fat iguanas. But cats are obligate carnivores, and the level of protein in their diet is so high that the iguana's got kidney failure on it. So high protein diet equals kidney failure for animals that aren't supposed to be eating a high protein diet.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I have a slew of more questions about iguana ownership. When we come back, we'll talk about them, and we got some yucky questions too. Don't want to miss this, folks. Come on back. Talking iguanas today on the radio event with Dr. Kelly. So do you think with all this information that you have that is iguana ownership plateauing or on the downswing? What do you think? Is there any, just out of curiosity, I don't know.
Since I really don't see reptiles in practice, I don't have a good feeling as far as how popular or less popular they may be compared to, say, 20 years ago. I don't know.
But still sold to the places like PetSmart and Pet, they can still walk out of there with an iguana, I think.
I read today that PetSmart quit selling specifically iguanas because of the high rate of surrender to rescues and then the extremely low rate of adoption from rescues.
It didn't look good.
They didn't want to be part of that
They're
anymore.
a corporation. They want to look good. Yeah,
they didn't want to be part of that anymore.
A lot more bearded dragons. I do see them all the time. And they're so much easier. Again,
they appear to have the most personality.
Yes.
As far
so
as
personality goes a long way.
Now, they still have all of these temperature, humidity requirements, diet requirements too. But I think people maybe get more attached to them because they are kind of friskier. They actually do interact.
They're very sweet.
They're much more tameable.
Yes. Yeah. Even at an older age.
And they don't get as big.
Right. True. And their tails aren't lethal weapons that will break. Doesn't seem to be the case anyway. I hear they actually...
Maybe it's because they're Australian. They're just cool.
Hello, mate. Righto. So one part of reptile ownership, certainly with the bearded dragon and with the iguana, the thing that we were always very conscious of is the fact that we can actually get diseases from them.
Oh, so reptiles, healthy, normal reptiles, definitely can have salmonella living in their gut, and it will not make them sick.
No.
But
do a number on us.
Yes, potentially. Yes. So you always wash your hands after handling any reptile.
Right.
That's just part of the checklist of owning a reptile.
Absolutely. But, just even cleaning their cages, of course, you were just,
True.
Whatever, if there was salmonella in their belly, then it's probably in the corner of their cage too. And,
yes.
You had to be on top of that. And
hopefully, if you have a dog and you pick up after it, you wash your hands. Hopefully, hopefully you wash your hands after scooping your cat's box. So,
absolutely.
The same thing would definitely hold true for any animal cage.
I washed up to my elbows. I was like, I was like, I don't want to.
You're like a surgeon scrubbing in.
I'm going in. Holy cow! The worst. So, what do we do about this iguana problem here? I mean,
I discourage people when they ever, think to ask ahead of time about
should I get my son
an iguana a good pet, or should I get a reptile as a first pet for my children? I discourage people constantly because we generally don't see healthy pet reptiles. Period.
Yeah.
It's the rare owner who's doing everything right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I got to tell you the story of Soup.
Soup.
Yeah, I can tell you about Soup. So this is probably the first 2 months that my wife and I were together, and she had a friend who was going on a long voyage, and I came home, and in the corner of our bedroom, a very large tank, and in that tank was Soup. Soup was the name of their boa constrictor that my wife had just taken in.
Okay.
Very exciting. I of course, kind of wigged out because I have a cat. And I said, I have visions of my cat disappearing down this boa constrictor's throat. And she said, yeah, that could happen. So I said, I don't want that. So cat was now barred from the bedroom. That's fine. But we had to feed Soup rats. Feeder rats. Live ones would be preferential.
Oh, okay.
So we tossed the rat in. First time we had to do it. And then my wife and I started basically holding each other, hugging and crying because we were like, run, rat, run, because we fell in love with the rat. It was horrible. Everything about it was horrible. So again, and then my wife, who was very cavalier at that time, not so much anymore, but at that point she says, I can take him out, no problem. She took him out, and he sort of began to, a tightness began to occur on her left arm, working her way up her shoulder as this thing began to constrict, which is in their name. See, my wife's tuning in. I'm making fun of you today, darling. So we called this person because we couldn't handle the feeding process anymore. But then again, I have to go back to what kind of maniac brings in a boa constrictor into their house? How do you fall in love with a critter like this? I mean, and what's going on?
Personally, with snakes, I think it's more of a coolness factor.
Oh, great. That always works out well.
Some people just really think they're cool and like to watch them and hold them. And, so what if you can't scratch them behind the ears and get them to be happy? No,
they don't seem to be interested in that whatsoever. And I guess maybe there are constrictors who get used to their owners and don't kill them.
And there are many pet snakes who can successfully, from a very early age, be trained to accept dead food.
Oh, sure.
So you buy frozen mice.
Yes.
And
that was an option.
Give that, if and that's what if somebody really wants a snake, I'd say, well, that's what I'd recommend is get one where the person the snake breeder can show you that, yes, indeed, they'll eat something that's already dead, because that's a lot easier.
Well, we like Swansons and TV dinners, so why wouldn't they?
So interestingly, my very first pet rat was a snake food fail.
You are truly a wonderful individual.
She was a pinky, so a newborn rat put in with a snake. No. The snake never, after 2 days of just laying there, the snake didn't touch her. So
didn't like veal.
a friend who was, working at this snake farm took her out, felt bad for her, took her out and fed her, and she became a wonderful pet rat. And I inherited her at like age 2, and she lived to be 5, and she was a great pet.
They're such great animals. I know people don't believe it. Say rats, that's gross.
Rats are excellent pets.
They are so personable.
Yes.
Unbelievable. They love their owners.
Yeah, and they have way more interesting personalities than your average hamster or gerbil.
Yeah, no, they just want to bite. They just want to bite you. Rats never bite you. Our rats never.
It's very rare.
They nibble a little just to taste you. They get maybe get your finger salt a little. But
rats almost never bite.
No, they just they like you. I mean,
they're pretty cool.
Oh man, so I mean, we still have people out there, and I mean, getting exotic animals is still kind of a thing, and it shows up in the news every now and then. I mean,
there's still a ridiculous number of iguanas imported into the U.S. every year too, which is sad because
that's crazy.
Most of them, are not going to stay in the home once they get a certain size, and it's bad.
Yeah, I knew a few people who had iguanas, and then they don't anymore, and I kind of know why. But I don't know anybody anymore. I just don't see them around anymore as much either.
So perhaps people have fallen away from that. Ferrets used to be more popular than they are now too, I feel like, and they're I see them pretty rarely now, except for the ones that I have at home.
Live in your house. Yes. Interesting, huh? Well, so Floridians, if you're tuned in, leave them alone, and
they may wake up tomorrow and crawl back up the tree where they came from. But an adult iguana can weigh up to 20 pounds. I would not want to be hit by a 20-pound anything falling, say, even 10 feet up from even 10 feet up.
There's that. And certainly if they decide to weaponize their tail with a 20-pounder, they'll lop your head off.
Yeah.
I mean, good
interesting
Lord.
Times in Florida.
Oh my gosh. It's it's always interesting in Florida.
It is, you're right.
That's what they tell me. I think we just lost our Florida audience. So anyway, that's the iguana story, and we're sticking to it. And next week we'll be back with more cool stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you.